So basically, it's a house that some guy, I think, bought like really long time ago, and he passed it on to his son now as like a piece of land and a open space for multiple people to come together. It's almost like a clubhouse or something. So it's a very large space. It's built for multiple people to sleep there and stay there. It has like bathrooms and kitchen that is really laid out for I think 20 people or so, and obviously bedrooms and stuff.
I see.
It has a garden, like a communal space for like a large room, and like a woodworking shed. It's all relatively old and not maintained, so it seems like it has been passed on recently or quite recently, and they're almost like in the process of rebuilding it, repurposing it. But it's of course all very slow because it's physical things, physical infrastructure, and these things need a lot of change, like a lot of work. And it was quite interesting to be there because they hosted this event called Play Drive over, I think, about a week, and invited a bunch of people in there. And it was supposed to be like focused on creating games and also food, or like, sorry, having food. Some people could stay in the place, other people could stay outside and camp. They asked for like purchase of tickets. So I think if you wanted to stay and sleep, you had to pay something like 200 euros or something, plus 100 euros for the food throughout the week, which was, to me personally, quite a lot. So I just brought a tent and camped in the garden and brought my own food, which is also kind of a nice like thing. I think I'll as I keep traveling, I'll definitely keep my tent and keep like some camping equipment because
it's a good habit.
Yeah, and it worked quite well. And in general, people were super nice. I think what was quite remarkable and one of the kind of biggest insights for me in terms of like BD and strategy is that these are exactly the people that need help for coordination of their little organization, but not just like they need the help, but they're also very receptive for it because they see in real time how things degenerate. And how people can very easily, like, I don't know if there's a better way to describe it. Like, I think it's very easy to see the free rider problem, where it's very easy to make use of public infrastructure, but it's very hard to actually maintain it and contribute to the maintenance of it and be responsible for it, because you just come in for a week and then you leave. So there's no attachment to making sure things sustain themselves.
Which is actually what's happening with digital nomads also, right? Like you see people come in as a tourist, they use all the all the infrastructure. There's no taxation, there's no actual like contribution, even with the effort or activism, right, in terms of maintaining that infrastructure. And I think that probably like that population, though not majority, it's still on the rise. So then is like, how do you ensure that there is some level of, I wouldn't even say gatekeeping, but at least is there like a token gating that kind of like provides a mechanism for the community to say that, hey, all the folks that are coming in can be balanced with how much contribution do we seek out of that,
right?
And then how do we support that system, basically?
Exactly. Yeah, and this is where they actually resonated a lot with the Deep Teams tool that I showed them, because I went there primarily to do an organizational design workshop and just generally teach them about organizing. I didn't even think that it's going to be very applicable to the actual space. And I brought some Collins meat, and I brought some ferments, started some fermentation, and I brought a friend who was interested in, or like he's actually quite experienced in, like in city or urban farming, hydroponics and stuff like that. We didn't have any like massive expectations, but all of these things ended up being extremely valuable for the space.
Very cool.
And so yeah, the tool, or kind of the system that we built, is actually very, very applicable, not just for these like remote online organizations that we're building, so like Deep Work or like now Collabland. And I'm actually also caught up with a friend recently from Hummingbot. He's the CEO from Hummingbot, and he's interested in particular the processes the processes. You need to kind of adapt the processes in order to use the tool. So anyway, long story short, in this kind of not retreat house, they really resonated with this idea of basically project management of what is going on, so that people stay accountable for the work that they're contributing to the actual infrastructure. And I think the easiest kind of gating of these communities doesn't necessarily even have to. So I'm actually, over the last weeks, I tend to like distance myself from even like using the term token as something that like describes infrastructure, because it's actually just a digital, like it's a technical term that doesn't actually have a lot of meaning. So I think to avoid this free rider problem, people just need to take ownership of work that needs to be done in order to maintain the system. So like, imagine you come into this space and you select what you want to do, and then you have to negotiate how valuable that is for the infrastructure. Do you want to like contribute building something new? Is that valuable for the thing? Well, then maybe you want to do it, and then either you get paid for it, or you just get to stay and sleep somewhere and you get maybe some food or something. Because what you're building apparently creates some value. So if we do that the same way that we do it at Deep Work, it's like, you're interested in participating in this thing. Well, you have to primarily be interested in participating. Like, staying there is almost like that's the reward for being able to contribute. But the primary intention is not the exploitation or the use of the amenities and the infrastructure, but the actual contribution. So what do you want to do? Do you like to, well, do you need a place to stay? Well, then maybe the easiest thing is to just clean something or do some cooking or something that has a very easy, like maybe set of responsibilities or like a specific documented workflow. Also, by the way, nothing was documented in that space. Also crazy. Like we actually documented the process for like their farming, their mushroom growth, and some fermentation. And it was in the end like the only visible thing that actually happened there. Everything else was just like, well, we played games.
I think this is so great, like hearing the experience from, and I was able to compare this to like the end of the Zuzalu period where people came up with learnings. And I believe some of those learnings were documented, but it wasn't really as well documented to say, how do you run this next time, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the purpose. So that I'm gone, I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm never going to come back. But I started something, and someone else might pick up fermentation. Someone else might pick up doing mushrooms, which is actually what happened. So there was a person before that, Justina, actually, you know her.
Yeah.
So she set up the Martha tent for growing mushrooms. Something didn't really work out, or the host wasn't able to like figure out how to continue. Justina's gone. Nobody knows what's done. Nobody knows what needs to be done.
Right.
But now the next person is here, luckily, who knows how to grow mushrooms, but he has to start from scratch. So we started from scratch, but then also documented everything. So now next time someone comes and is interested in mushrooms, they already have all of this thing, so that they can just hear the pictures of all the things that are required in order to get the soil. Here's how you get this, like, or the substrate. Here's how you get the starter. Here's already an existing mushroom. Here in this corner is the tent, and everything is like basically findable. So the purpose is really to continue regardless of who's going to be there. It's like, here's the hat, take it.
Makes sense. I'm just also like going a few steps further and saying like, hey, how do you then train, sort of like OpenAI, ChatGPT to provide very specific guidance on the templates that come out of this, the playbooks that come out of this, because humans have now documented the process, accustomed to that land, accustomed to that geography, accustomed to that culture. Can you then just say, like, hey, like, let's train a model that is more specific to that use case and provide details, and sometimes maybe even like do the, if this then that type of things, like let's source mushrooms from here, let's source, some other things from there. I think one of the topics that came to my mind today as I was actually thinking about the last week was how many of us have actually not worked in an office for a while. I don't think we're going back to something which was primarily known as an office, right? Yeah. This is our office. Like the way we work with our teams, we do have a mental, I think, mode in our brains that switches to, sort of like an office space or a workspace where we have like whiteboards, as you have behind your, your wall, for example. But I also don't think that it's going to be as distinguished forever, like that we have an office space and then we have a home space. It actually could merge into creative space, right, where we are always creating some things. So it
Totally
is
agree.
really cool to see, like when you move to, say, a conference, or when you go to like a remote place to organize a few folks, to come together and create something new. How do you design that space to ensure that it comes across a creative space, right? And food could be creation, farming could be creation, documenting all of these things could be creation. Yeah.
I think also, by the way, if you ever if you also plan on like going to different places this year, keep track of your notes, then we can always compare of the learnings. My plan this year is to travel across these different places, host workshops, provide value, or like in some way, like fermenting or with the meat supply chain, and collect the learnings of what these people could do better. And then next year, I think will be probably the time to buy some land and build something already based on all of these learnings. Currently, the way I see it, and this is more like observation, first of all, design happens over time. So the space co-evolves with the people who use the space. So it will largely depend on the skills, the people who started at first. This is where we actually get to this cybernetic notebook that we can also get into in a bit, where it starts with what do people actually want to do? Like if you and I buy a piece of land, or like just for example, we buy it, we build a little house, what are the everyday activities that we both exhibit? How do we produce value for our environment? So what are the things that we do? So like we do work on the computer. Okay, so that means there needs to be some kind of space, or at least some spaces where that is just possible in as healthy way as possible. So how do we want to design our work that we do on a regular basis so that it supports our life, like our remotely connected life, or using computers as interfaces with some kind of like purposeful work? Then there might be things like, like I personally do fermentation. In organizational design, it's things like, you start categorizing what different people are doing together. So you start with one function, with one activity, like fermentation or cooking, and then you look at like what first of all, does that require its own space? Maybe that's already enough, but then you might come into things where multiple functions are combined. So if you have a kitchen, if you're cooking something, you might need different skills. You might need someone who is like, I don't know, preparing the meat, and then you might need someone who actually fries the burgers. So that's like multiple people. So that's where a space is categorized. And then and that's what makes a kitchen, because you have multiple people who work together on something that just kind of requires the same apparatus that needs to be close to each other. So my point is that is very applicable to any type of like kind of categorical space. So in this space in Austria, they had a room where multiple people created like a tabletop game, and it was a huge room, and it involved multiple people, and it has like this huge table with a tabletop game that was in process. They had a specific corner where they installed this farm bot that would plant like salad and then like water it every now and then, more or less automatically. So it's like online or in digital organizations, it's these mental spaces, like departments of our organization, where people just have intellectual proximity, where they work together, where they're on calls frequently. And the same applies to physical spaces, I think. People just like work together closely, and that defines the purpose of a space. And then, long story short, we just need to kind of observe what do people do together, and then define certain purposes for these spaces and keep kind of designing them so these spaces support the activities. Because I don't know if I mentioned that Le Corbusier, a famous architect, has this quote that a house is a machine for living in. Well, because it's like you are inside the machine that helps you, that also has an operational model. Yeah, and it's part of you. It's like you are your activities extrapolate beyond the boundaries of your body into this physical space, so that you start using walls for whiteboards, or you might like. There's also who was that guy? What was the name of this guy again? is like a health influencer who is like very good at like, I think,
Oh,
archery or like
Uberman.
yeah, no, that's it's he's quite specific. I forgot his name. He popped up. He doesn't even have his own podcast, but he was basically saying like, build your living room so that it supports your movement in a healthy way. So rather than having chairs, build like put in like, you know, foam rollers, put in like hang up a pull-up bar,
Right.
have like floor seating, so
Right.
that as you like kind of experience the space, the space experiences you. So like the
Right.
space facilitates your healthy lifestyle.
Right.
And then it becomes a very kind of unique and very personal physical space that is co-designed, co-evolved with your requirements, with your personal requirements.
Mm.
So, and this also like this only works if you can really like specifically keep track of the evolution of the things that you do and the space that you design. So, or like the space as an organization, like that's where you really need to see it in a kind of project-based manner, so that you keep evaluating the success of it. Because you like most people, they go almost like in a I don't know, it's like they take the living room off the shelf and then they copy paste it into their living room. Chair, table, sofa, carpet, done. Now we need to like maybe like make the colors match, or like find some kind of like famous designer that makes it looks nice, makes the furniture look nice. But that's like a standardized approach. It's not going to fit you. So it's like one thing and it's built to last forever. But that's not how the world works. So
Right. Right. Right.
we need systems to kind of allow this coevolution. And this is probably also the reason why these people resonated with deep teams, because it sees everything as a evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this was amazing insight, Andre, from your experience. Now, when I go to places, I would definitely take a keen interest in watching out exactly what behaviors, what systems, and how do those influence the outcomes of this group coming together. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see. I mean, it's unfortunate as well that most spaces are just boring because people don't put the thoughts into designing them intentionally. But I think the best way to think about it is to kind of be intentional when you personally like buy things, or like when you consider like extending your living space. Then you can really think about how does that influence you over time. And like what do you want from yourself? Like, do you want to be more flexible? Do you want to be stronger? Well, then every item can support that. Every single thing that you buy can actually get you to these goals, because it's part of like objects define, you decide on the objects you put in your life, and
Right.
the objects define the way that you shape your behavior.
That's a very important question to start with when you're looking for a space, be it your office space, be it your workspace or home, or even like a co-working with the group that you're visiting. And I think you're right that you could, even if the space is like retro, or like is a space that is not, like fit for your needs, you could actually design it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. it, yeah, and it can be retro. Like then you can go and like actually layer on different types of like visual design, or like historical like references. Yeah,
Right.
it's like yeah, it's like the form, well, not necessarily the form follows the function, but the function comes first, and then you define the narrative, define the polish, define what people see, and how they feel. And then you can also like, if you so like on one, this is like already going way beyond what I actually wanted to talk about, but then like you design the space for yourself, and then you can think of like, how do you design it for others? Like,
Yeah.
you know, when you were here, it's like the everything was kind of intentional, so that people, like, we all kind of ended up sitting on the carpet on the floor in the living room.
Right.
Like, that was designed that way because previously things were differently arranged and people were just like kind of lost, or like just stood around awkwardly or something. I
Mm.
think when I think after you left, I actually also removed the piano, because that was kind of an obstacle that was
Mhm.
getting people from actually kind of, you know, getting to that space. But yeah, so then you can think of, I forgot, there was another architect who was really, I can look it up, who was very intentional about, he designed entire houses and also with kind of the same idea of a flow, like what do people go through? What are the spaces that they...
Yeah. I think I've been looking at this thing just because I'm more seriously considering how far we have come across in the in the world of like design, product engineering, venture investing as well, where I don't think that the like you would always have a WeWork to go to, or you'd always have a co-working space to go to, or sometimes you'll have like a client meeting in their office. But
Right.
at the end of the day, you will probably have a home base from which you have the best setup to design for flow. Like for example, if I'm traveling, one of the things that comes to my mind all the time is if I'm traveling, it does disrupt my flow, because my best flow is usually when I'm at my standing desk, or when I'm actually working in this room, because I've got like all my notes, I've got like continuity of like what are my reminders, and I've got things around me to help me like be always hydrated, always like having some dry fruits and things like that. So I think when that environment is changed, when you're traveling digitally, how do you carry that environment with you, or at least have some sense of flow?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Maybe also a good segue into the notes, because I worked on this problem as well. And I think, again, this is something that is probably more related to not the actual space, but more like your actual behavior, because the space changes, so you need to change as well.
You need to change, yeah.
And you need to find out the ways that make it easy for you to adapt to the new environments. Let me quickly share this with you so I can stop it. Okay, 1 second.
I'm actually thinking there is something like, I don't know if you're on a Farcaster, the protocol that has multiple clients now, but I was actually at FarCon this weekend at the Farcaster event. It's like an unconference, and Dan Romero also showed up, the founder of Farcaster, and he talked about how this event just happened serendipitously, and like it brings in like the community of builders and creatives together on the Farcaster thing. And like there's many things happening. There's like somebody building physical digital fashion connections on the Farcaster community. There's somebody building a separate type of like chat experience, where you could, from the chat experience itself, you could make transactions happen between communities. And then like a lot of basically a lot of good experiences come through. There's like Instagram like experiences and all. Did you share it with my Google ID?
I shared it on your Superscript email.
Okay, then I'm logging. Yep. Hopefully it'll show up with that.
Let me just check Farcaster. It rings a bell, but I forgot what it was.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Right. Social networks.
Okay, shared with me. How do I know which one is shared with me? Okay, yeah, I can see. It's like cybernetics, Kishore Cybernetics, right? Is that the one?
Cyber notes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I can show you how I handle the travel thing, and that maybe gives you a little bit of an idea of how to use these notes in general, and then we can also just like start by filling it out and see like what activities would fit in your life.
Awesome.
So basically what you have is this notepad. The intention is to categorize your activities as like, what are the things that you care about, but not like the things, but what are the activities that you care about. I have like supplementation, so it's like one category where I like look through what else am I taking into my body that does not fall under the category of eating, or socializing, organizational design. That's kind of the work that I do. I have sleep. And then I also have traveling, I think, somewhere. So each of these activities has it's a weekly goal. It's like I just set myself how much attention I want to pay to that activity, or how much I want to improve it for the next week. And then it has just a list of goals, so things that I want to achieve following that activity. And this combination already gives me a little bit of a balance into like what are my goals with that, where I want to go, where I want to develop myself in the next iteration, and what do I want to stay away from. So it's like, from a developmental psychology standpoint, that's kind of like gives you a trajectory of development. So things that you really want to get away from, and things that you want to strive towards.
Mm.
And these things also map onto how systems work. So kind of it's at the same time, the systems engineering approach. You're building a complex system. Every single component has a goal, and it also has some hazards that through every loop you want to just keep track of. So it helps you to stay in balance, stay kind of aligned.
Makes sense.
This cycle.
You can see that. Yeah.
And so then the rest of that is really simple. The rest of that is just taking notes, things that you come across in your everyday life that fit into this category. So anytime you encounter any of these hazards, or maybe you want to particularly go further towards that goal, you already have a set of notes that are very, very specific to you and your environment. And we can talk about how that applies to AI later, because this is also good, like kind of data to feed an algorithm. There's actually a website where you can type in your results and see what it comes, like what it recommends you to change in your diet. And I do the same for traveling. So I also realized at some point, if I travel, kind of writing all these things down. And now I would say there's barely a difference when I'm at home or when I'm traveling, because I'm able to kind of start with this traveling activity at some point, and I know the goals of how to stay in balance in that particular environment, activity, or like, I guess, lack of environment, or like uncertainty. So for traveling, I take iboga before flying, which is it's like a root bark, an African root bark that calms you down and gets you to sleep better. Also, to me personally, it somehow increases my recovery. Drink water as much as possible. There's a lot of stuff that's like from different podcasts. I take sometimes VPC 157, which is a peptide that you take a few drops and it signals your body to recover faster. So it's generally not very there's not a lot of public information about it, in terms of like, there's no mainstream information about it, because it's very easy to manufacture, very cheap, and it's not the traditional pharmaceutical industry is not really interested in peptides. But this particular one has been used for over a decade by the bodybuilding community without any side effects, and it seems to increase I mean, for me, it's like just a lifesaver. It saves like time when I sleep, recovers me better, and so on. And then I have like, what am I putting in my backpack? I have a 20-liter backpack when I travel for 7 days. I have more when I travel for longer. Here's the supplements I'm taking with me, the tech, my clothing, and so on. And so that's like a relatively, I don't have to go through the whole list, but it's just like
because it kind of prepares you to have that proactively, like in your mind when you're traveling. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, I know the items now that I can take with me. Right. Or like with foods, I don't want to eat shit. So like, here's a list of foods that always work. So it's like always high protein, always pretty natural. On long flights, I just fast. I don't eat anything. Or even on shorter travel days, I now don't eat anything, because it just helps me recover better. And yeah, it's like, you don't have to think about these things anymore. Next time I travel, I just look up what I can do.
Mm. Yeah. This is very helpful, Andrej. I think this is probably where a combination of like some level of like all three conversations we just had, like the remote work, the living or co-living social, in a remote place, and then the ability to basically have your life kind of like designed and carried on with you wherever you go, right?
Exactly.
You can basically continue to measure and improve that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is like also the same for like finding a living space.
Yeah.
I'm still in the process of finding it. So like, I'm just keeping track of all the notes regarding that particular process.
Right. I'm definitely very serious about thinking about, so for me, it's more of a 5-year goal. I think yours is more like a year, so, and I could actually break the 5-year goal into like, try something first year, graduate to something else next year, and then see if you can actually do a more permanent change, within 5 years. And that will obviously need a whole bunch of logistics, the job situation, but also the most important piece will be like the actual training of your body and your mind towards living in that space.
100%.
So I
yeah.
do think that this is a good way to start. sort of like documenting what do you want in a living space from that point onwards, right? And it's not something where, like, because living spaces are physical in nature as well, you can't iterate them on as fast as you can just iterate on like buying a table and throwing it off and buying the other one. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. I also noticed that when I travel, like for example, I'm going to France in a week, I'm already like mentally preparing for it. I don't know, this has been like definitely a transition over the last few years, especially when I travel. It's almost like the travel starts before I even get on the train, like and long time before. So like, I mean, of course, I'm also like getting rid of a lot of other shit in my apartment, but there's just so much, yeah, like it's so true that you have to like that you're preparing mentally quite significantly, because it's, yeah, you're not just changing your environment, because like if you just change your environment, then your whole system is out of whack, but like
Yeah.
you're changing yourself along with that environment, and that is a slow transition.
Love it. Love it. This topic does need, like iterations as we prepare ourselves to that. My next step here is to also connect you with, Angelo, and have a trio call maybe the next time. So, Angelo is also in Jersey City physically, but he keeps traveling. And right now he's doing very similar things that you're doing, but he's doing it as build cities in the US.
Nice.
And he's already built one location somewhere in Idaho as a community. They're basically looking at opening up that location to more people from the Build Cities network to come and co-work, live together. And the good thing is that you started with that element of like, how do you contribute to that place instead of just being a tourist? So these guys are also thinking along the same line, that how do you bring in contribution to the local economy?
Nice.
And even if people actually just come in for like an event or a conference or for a longer duration, they actually have a template to know how to contribute.
Whoa, that's very cool. Yeah, I think, yeah, I can imagine that once we start, like it would be great to talk to them, because I think once we start documenting the functions, the actual kind of things that, or like activities people can contribute with,
Yeah.
and we figure out also like long term how to tokenize those.
Yeah.
Like right now for me, the step is just to kind of go across these communities and just create the documentation and onboard people onto deep teams so that they start using it. And then we can actually also kind of slowly transition our conversation towards how do we use like decentralized technologies to make the skills visible and temperable, so that it's almost like your passport then, like it's your mutatable passport. Like what are the things that you're able to do? Well, enter the space, and like it's, yeah, you just like, if you're a host, you look at someone's activities, functions, what have they done before, what can be applicable to the space, and then you let them in based on what's required in that local economy.
Yeah. I made a note of that. This is really great as you think about it. I'm also going to give it a spin as you shared the cybernetics thing with me on Coda, and see if I can actually do. So let me show you if I can. There's actually a paper cybernetics version that I have created.
Oh,
I'm
cool.
going to change that to, call it like the digital version, and see what happens. Live visual effects.
Nice.
Hopefully you can see this. This is the
Right.
So it has
Perfect.
like myself in the middle at June of 2023, and then
Nice.
like financial, skills, health, existential, which is living. Those
Right,
types.
right, right.
What I'm trying to do is like to create a mind map of what are the things that I have a question mark on, what are the things I have like I know, and then what are the things that I want to track, and then thereby I'm then going to document the KPIs of what am I tracking every week. But I think now that you've shared the Coda page with me, I'm going to translate that into the page, and hopefully the next time we meet, let's try and get a bit more structure on like how am I tracking it? Like, is this making sense from your experience and learning? What can I do with that? Yeah.
What were the 5 areas? So you had financial control, skill development.
Financial skills. I actually added a separate one for new income source, because I'm in the middle of thinking about, like think about like transition into new income sources that are more persistent but slower than my current lifestyle. Because I'm just back to back. There is a high degree of burnout in the type of roles I have played.
Yeah.
Then health and existential, right? So health is basically everything that you talked about: exercise and eating healthy, sleeping. And then existential is all about finding a new living in some way, finding a new place to live, where I could actually see some requirements already very similar to what you just said, which is, hey, what gives me the best, physical and mental flow? What gives me the most flexibility in the environment that I'm in, right? I would actually add a new one, which is travel. I did not have that, but now I will add it. Yeah.
I just put in, I'm just going to share my screen real quick just to give you like a head start.
Awesome.
So also just to explain to you how to use it. So essentially, when you start, just add on, you can go to weekly review, and here you can just add a new activity. So weekly review is like the thing that will be kind of prominent over time as we work on this also together is that we just need to check in every now and then to not forget, because rather than having notifications on your phone, which I don't see works, what I've noticed is mutual accountability and kind of like relationships with other people that help you hold yourself accountable helps a lot more in developing a habit of whatever you want to develop in. So when I wanted to be serious about being a magician, for example, I had like insane social anxiety. It was just impossible for me to actually perform. But I met some people, or like I actually looked out for people who also did magic, and then I met up with them, and then I looked for opportunities where they would perform, so I could also come with them and perform as well. So
yeah,
like I think this is very similar here. So basically, like just add on whichever category of development you think is useful for you, and then simply give it like a, I don't know, a rating in 1 to 10 stars for how you think you will pay attention to that next week, and it'll kind of pop up on the top.
Okay, great.
This is your weekly goal. And then every now and then what you can do is just like in the evening or so, you go to this daily rating, and then you give yourself a rating. So like whatever kind of you don't necessarily need to, but like it helps review that every now and then, just to keep track of how you kind of did these things.
Right.
And then you can either on your mobile phone, you just click on one of those and you save it individually, or you click save all, it'll reset it, and then it will show up here as a rating. I'm not actually sure why it's not like, it should actually be
it should vary. Yeah, it should
it should be different. I'll check why it's not working, but yeah, it's a work in progress. But it should basically show you a comparison of how much you rated yourself compared to your weekly goal. So it also, over the course of a week, it averages out whatever you input.
Right. No, this is very helpful. I think this is the easiest start to start with, and then it's all about discipline and making sure that we like just rigorously do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. You mentioned you're going to France. Are you going to be there until ETHCC?
Yes, I will actually probably not go to ETHCC because there was no opportunity for me to do anything.
I see.
Like ETHCC, I was not a speaker, and at Shelling Point, they also had a different focus, so they seem to be more technical.
Gotcha.
Again, which makes sense, I guess. It's more like Web3 is the DeFi, like an R&D for DeFi, so that's the train they're rolling on. But I have been accepted on ETH Barcelona for something. I don't know if it's a talk or a workshop.
Cool.
So I will be definitely in Barcelona sometime early July.
Cool.
And and then I will also go to Croatia in mid-August for MetaFest.
I see.
I'm currently helping them organize this like DAO track of helping smaller teams create their own little organizations and DAOs.
No, that's pretty cool. Let's continue. I think the 2 weeks check-ins are actually really cool. That way we can actually have a concept of like execution and brainstorming.
I agree.
And we'll continue to.
I love it. I also have like I feel like the structure of these calls are also just very enjoyable because as you say, we get to like float around with our thoughts, but then also just be a bit more actionable and progress towards something.
Yeah, and it's actually not really too, I'd say, out there as well, right? Like you can relate to what you're doing in your current life, instead of like, hey, there's too much mental bandwidth that you have to apply to take the first step. So we'll continue to iterate, and then what I'll do is just as a next step, I'll also quickly figure out some times with you and Angelo and then have a call. Yeah.
Cool. Nice. That'd be great.
Great syncing up, and thanks for extending this. Yeah.
Yeah, likewise. Excited. Also, it was great to see you, like always. And
likewise.
Have a wonderful rest.
Yeah, we'll continue async. I'm actually meeting Rodolfo sometime this or next week.
Oh,
so
cool.
We'll let you know what comes out from that.
All right.
Cheers.
Cool. Well, have a wonderful rest of the day and chat soon, man.
Bye.
Bye-bye.